We're going to try it again, even though it's been gradually getting worse over time. Sorry. I don't know, man. I don't know what happened. Same old, I guess. I do my best, I really do, but it's just not. It's just, I think I just need a new computer, and I don't know. I can't afford something that's good, so I want something that's decent, really decent. It's gonna last a long time. All right. This time I'll try my best to keep my eyes on the prize here. Yeah, I'll just continue where I left off. We may not have as many people come back in, and that's fine. I don't know what else to do. So I looked at this and I thought about those levels, and there's a pretty simple explanation for everything, right? And one of the ways to look at this is just it's just a wave that's basically building around the level that it's been trying to obviously hold as a support. I mean, it can't hold it as a support, it's going to drop. So naturally, I'm like looking over here thinking that, well, these cycles are only so long, and they're all the same. Like they're basically the exact same length of time, and they're the same distance apart. Okay? So here's the problem, right? If you don't move fast enough, if you don't get going, then you're going to basically be stuck. When the cycle's over, you have the problem of, so the short of this all is, if you during this upward cycle don't break these levels, or you do break them and come back below, then you're in big trouble. And if you look at when this cycle ends, it doesn't really matter if you think it goes high or you think it goes low, like you think it doesn't go above 32, you think it goes up to 35. All of those would be potential distribution options, because if at the end of this cycle, right, it doesn't really make a huge difference, again, where exactly you are. If at the end of this cycle you break down right here, then it's over. And so I was looking at this thinking to myself, well, certainly if it got up high, like that wouldn't be on the table, right? And then I'm thinking, well, that's not necessarily true, because a UTAD comes up above and it may actually crap out. We don't know. But if it ends up breaking down, it's probably going to be at the level that we currently are kind of sitting at. It's going to be right here at this 2650, because that region, which is clearly close enough to the middle here, it may not be exactly the middle, right? That also correlates and corresponds to, I think, these creek intersections and so on and so forth as you're going into really the end of this cycle. So there's a problem here in that when you get to the next ending, which is October 28th, if you're not above, right, then you have the risk, high risk, and we haven't made the backups that we need to make, all that kind of stuff, right, that could happen into a top. You're at a higher risk of capitulation. So it's not like this has to happen. So you need to kind of keep in mind that there has to be a breakdown, but it is a pretty obvious area. So there's a simple way to understand it, which is you're just consolidating here across, maybe a squishy 26 middle. And then what I did in addition to that was I looked at when we go back in time, where does that lead us? That's kind of the middle. You need to kind of hold on to that area to see an advancement. So again, it almost doesn't matter that much if it goes really high. This place that these two creeks are intersecting right here around 27, especially going into the end of this upward cycle, which again, they're all pretty much even. That's where you don't want to be essentially breaking down. So I don't think it's as complex as, I just don't think it's that complicated in a lot of ways. like we haven't done much of anything outside of what we've already talked about with the iterations and stuff. You can see we've jumped over this marker, and if we hold it, there's really no reason to expect, if we hold here into next week, there's really no reason to expect we wouldn't take off. I'm not saying we're going to go to the moon just yet, and I'm going to give you some positive news after this, because you guys are probably looking at this chart thinking this is all negative. But there's actually a big question mark here that I'm kind of interested in finding out the answer to. So there's clear evidence in my mind that that is the key zone, right? And you don't want to break back down through here, either at or shortly after, perhaps. And you can see what I mean by shortly after. Like each of these has like a small section. It's really interesting because these are like the same. They each have like a small section of sort of chop, and then they drop after the fact. And you can see both of them are roughly the equivalent. This one into an earnings. This one was after an earnings. But so certainly, like, I know that there's like a deadline, but that's really like the peak. And I did measure that. And then there's a second one, which is like the drop. And that's where I see that intersection so clearly. It's like right there. I mean, you can't unsee it once you see it. So I was like, oh, so there's basically this intersection right here that we do not want to drop through going into November, essentially, if we're not advancing. Then I went back and I looked at this as a downward kind of a motion instead of an upward motion, because I used this motion right here to help me define what could be a downward cycle. So if this were going to go down, where would it go if it waves up, right, and fails and then comes back down? And it's actually common sense. It comes back to like 1850 in this zone right here, and that's already being targeted. We know 15 was also targeted. I'm not going to talk about 15 just yet. I don't think that it matters today. I'm not going to talk about it today, but I think that this area around 18 makes sense because this is where we took off from. So this isn't exactly profound either. If you go back and you just look at this region, there's a potential fair value gap right here, which is slightly below 1780, slightly above 1750. I think it's reasonable to see that and then conclude that, yeah, that would probably be a reasonable area to expect us to come back to. There's a drop ledge back here in September. Again, it's a little late if you're looking at a 2-year cycle. We're obviously past September. We didn't get there, but it is what it is. You know, it's still there. It's still that level, you know. So timing aside, it's just a very important level. So I was looking at this and I was thinking about, well, what would you do if you're an operator who wants to pump it for this 32 warrant thing? But let's say you wanted to pump it, but you didn't actually want it to run like really hard. And that's where I came up with this idea that, like, well, in theory, if you go up to sort of where this widening is going and you just do a UTAD and then you break down, you can have like a hook or something right here around earnings. That's pretty normal, you know. And I was looking at this thinking like that would be a pretty simple way to like pump it up and then bring it back down to the same level we're at now, and then presumably even get lower. And I was looking at where these go to, and they go up to like 37 or something like that, like right around here. And I was like, okay, where's that go if you drop back through the middle? And you can see it's actually quite even. So if this is a widening on the occasion of a UTAD and it's really widening outward, then the drop there does lead you back to this low zone below liquidity, but you'd have to have like a equal part, like an upthrust basically. So you'd have to have some kind of a sweep here above the top in order to then kind of drag you down through the bottom. And so I was looking at it and I just measured it out. I didn't do anything beyond that. All I did was measure it out. And I was like, okay, so this is certainly like feasible. It's reasonable. So the idea here is not that we're going to dump right now. Actually, a lot of people are really bearish going in. I've been seeing it more and more in our chat too, in Discord. A lot of people are really bearish about that October 3rd date. But here's the thing. October 3rd is actually like right in the center of this bull cycle. That doesn't mean it has to be like super bullish, right? Like, you know how these all have like a halfway point too. Well, the interesting thing is that the halfway point on these guys is a peak that drops. So if you look at the waves here, they're not complex. They're kind of simple. I don't think there's much to it. You really just kind of stare at them and you're like, yeah, there it is. There's a wave 1, wave 2, wave 1, wave 2. We're still in wave 1. Wave 1 would go until October 3rd. So even though we've backed up already, and you might be thinking, well, then we're done for, right? Because then that's it. That's the end of it. Maybe it's just an abbreviated wave. That's not necessarily the case, because both of these actually had early, you can see this white line that I've drawn through the middle. I'll bold it for you. This is like the parallel that I was using, because I was like, hey, they're all on the same spot. And we're there again. We actually hit it again just now at 25.40. So it's very possible we're actually about to just springboard this next week into the 3rd. In fact, I would say it's very likely that that's going to happen. So here's the rub, right? You have, in my mind, this is a very good probability. I don't say it's the best, but it's just decent probability that this is actually in a good spot. And as long as it holds up kind of right here around 26.20s today, I think Monday you're likely going to get a pretty decent extension. Now, the problem with this is that as far as I can tell, if you're just doing like a measure system, so to speak, this ultimately has acted more or less as like a halfway point. So that's not very high. And if you use it as a halfway point here, it does follow that it doesn't actually go very high at all. So it kind of makes it look like, oh, it's only going to go up to here? Like, is that possible? Granted, there are times where I think that that's not quite accurate. For example, when we were down here in this low region, we built out for quite a while. This was like 2 months of sideways. This is like 2 months of sideways. And it yields a very big move. This is a very V-shaped recovery style move, so it's different. We do not spend a lot of time down bottom. And then again, we came back and we chopped around this same area quite a bit. We avoided going low for whatever reason, which does make me a little nervous. But at the same time, it's like, sure, if this only goes up 50-50, it's only going to hit like $29, which is right around that first gap. And then it's hard to say, because I can't say again that either of these have been hyper consistent. This actually pushed up all the way to the top of this trend. Again, I've got like, it's hard to tell, but I've got like 3 of these set up that are really more or less like equal parts. Okay. And so it's hard to know, because this one doesn't go beyond the red mark that I've got here, which is kind of a lower hit. That'd be like us going up to like 27 and stopping. This one goes all the way up. It's a full 50-50, but again, it starts lower, and so it has a bigger move. It's hard to say. Again, if you're just doing a measurement system, that's probably the best you could do, right? So on the big picture, you really have to have something else happen here to really push you beyond. I think it makes sense, because if you look at where those gap regions are, they're not exactly, this isn't really that complex. It's really, again, very simple. They're right on that first creek intersect that we need to get over. And we've been talking about that forever anyways. That's nothing new, so there's nothing new there, but it's right in that pocket around 29 up to about 30. So I am most concerned about that region going into Monday next week. But I got to say, like, again, on the whole, technically the 3rd, which is that warrant date, that is actually supposed to be like a middle point for this wave. So what does that mean? Well, I think it means, here's what I'm going to tell you, okay? And I don't know the future, all right? But what I can say is that each time this has pushed up and then come back, at least the last 2 times it's done this. And that's not a huge amount of times, right? But at least the last 2 times it's done it, you can see that it leaves from this pocket right here, which is another one of these parallels, to do the rest of the move. For us, that would be, again, coming back above that top. You can see from a liquidity standpoint, that's pretty much all that's happening, is you're just back testing the first push. So for us, that would be like backing up to 27, 23. So it'd be like us hitting 29 to 30 or higher. We don't know, because again, it could go all the way up. There's always that chance it just flies and goes all the way up past and goes to like 31, which would make sense to me. $31, a lot closer to 32. And then it would come back down and back test. Presumably could go lower than that. I mean, these both kind of dip beneath it quite a bit and then consolidated on it. They actually have the same motion. You can see the dip and then consolidation, push, dip, consolidation, push. But the rest of the push is completely mixed bag as well. This one almost has a full S-curve. This is just a second top. I mean, it's barely going over that mark again. This is a much more violent recovery. And we had used waves at that time, found that to be pretty agreeable. So with that in mind, the expectation might be, okay, it may come back pretty low and chop in this area, but at some point leading into the end, because this, again, very last minute, this is late October. This would maybe suggest that part of this is that you're going to be consolidating and breaking out of, again, I can't really say for sure, but it would look like you're just kind of coming across perhaps that creek, right? And assuming you got the creek test and everything like that and pushed off of it, that actually looks quite right to me. It doesn't look way out there off. So this kind of a push up into this warrant date on the 3rd, followed by a potential sell down after, again, this is kind of a bearish outlook because it sort of assumes that you don't actually go that high. And then you would come back up. So either 29 or 31 by Monday next week, which is very, very big move for one day, but it's essentially just a 50-50 here. And then you come back down, reconsolidate, and then you'd break out again. But here's the biggest problem with this. 32, I don't know if you can see on the chart very well where that is. It actually is like right above here. And again, if you were going to distribute and you didn't want to push high, it's certainly not impossible or improbable to suggest that if it hits that 32, maybe people sell off or something, you know, because they can exercise. I don't know. Maybe that's what causes the sell down. I really couldn't tell you. Because technically, I think until you exercise they're issued warrants. They're not immediately, like in my brain, I'm like, they wouldn't immediately be dilutive. They may just go ahead and price it in. But like technically, I think unless you exercise them, they don't actually become a share. So I'm not sure. Like it's confusing. So maybe that's what could cause that problem right there. I don't know. But this would be a bad place to get knocked back down again. So like I'm talking about this because I think the region that we're in right here, I'm not really sure I understand why they did what they did with the 32-bit. Maybe it has something to do with what happened over here. You remember there was like an offering back here at like this area. Maybe it has something to do with that. I really don't know. Trying to encourage people to get up above 24 and break this area. Again, in theory, like, does this necessarily mean it breaks down here? Well, the answer is no. Like, it doesn't, because while that's true, like there's a nice clean path down to 18, none of that's predetermined. If, for example, this is like a bigger breakout, remember the final cat ear is always what I call like a 4 top. It always has like a 1, 2, 3, 4 motion to it because it's got the M cross in it. In and of itself, it contains kind of everything. It would make sense to me that there could be a lot more chop, is what I'm trying to say. But what you can't conclude is that it's always going to break down. Because if during that time it does jump the creek, like I'm showing here, it's entirely possible that it then continues, right? And it does hit your 46 level. It just does it later in the year. Again, maybe going into that final rate cut in December, hard to say, right? This is a very tricky spot to be in because you're essentially like equal parts from both. We've been there before, right? It's very similar. But we really are talking about whether or not, at the end of the day, what we're talking about is whether or not you hold this level as a support versus not holding it, in which case you're probably going to do a sweep. You're probably going to go low and flush down here and go ahead and try back towards the bottom. So we're going to have to kind of play it by ear a little bit, but I think there's something else here that was really odd. This is kind of what I want to get to the point here, which is AMC. So GME is like, all right, whatever. I get it. It could come down. I can see where that path is. I see it pretty clearly. AMC, I feel the same way. There is a path down. I've been seeing it for a long time. We've talked about it a lot. But then this question came up in my head today, and I don't know why I never did it, but I was like, is this I couldn't tell you, like, why did I never do this? I was like, is this equal move set on AMC as well? Because they're basically 1-to-1 in terms of wave crosses. So are they actually like equal parts kind of doing these wave setups? You know, this one especially, I'm going to get rid of the drawings for a second so you can see it a little clearer. Look at the waves on they're very even. And if you look at the breakouts here on this cross, this is a moving average versus a 50-day. These are very clearly exactly the same, like every time. The cross up, the push, the cross up, the push, the cross up, the push. They're equal parts, right? And that's what led me to draw what I drew, because I was like, oh, how can I connect them based on these levels where they're buying up? And indeed, they are connected. They're all kind of in the same pocket, the same vein, right after pushing over that 50-day. So I was like, all right, well, they're obviously pretty even. We actually have another one back here. It's the same timing. I was like, what if you did that for AMC? What would you conclude? And this actually hurts my brain, because I went back and I looked at AMC and I thought, well, it should be the same, right? So I went back and I looked at the dates. That's the easiest thing to do. I was like, all right, well, this crossed in October into November. So this was a long, boring, sideways kind of October. And then in November, it pushed up. You know, I looked, obviously, at the first dates. We know those are the same because they have the same push-up dates. Everything about those is the same. So that's kind of a given. But then I did the second and the third dates, and I'm like, all right, April, that's also a given because that's the low that market hit with the big sell down, right, due to tariffs. And then before that, you had October through December. Now, this goes through late December. AMC only goes up until like December 6th or something, and then it drops. And so by the end of December, it's already back down to where it started. I took the first measurement, though, which goes from April 16th to about June 10th. That's this second peak. I didn't use the first peak. I used the second peak. And then all I did was I measured. This is really simple, okay? All I did was I measured from the first bottom to the second bottom, and it is about the same amount of time. The thing is that AMC jumps its creek and backs up at the same time that GME is at its bottom. So if you were listening carefully, I said that one of these was like October 28th, and then it hops the creek and goes. It stayed underneath its creek the whole time, and then all of a sudden it just goes on the 28th. You look at AMC and you're like, yeah, but it was already in an uptrend by then. It was, but if you look carefully, you can see that it actually was building out. It hadn't yet jumped its creek until here, which is October 24th. Very, very close. And then going into the 28th, it's breaking out. Very, very close. But I decided, how about I just measure to the bottom like I did on GME. I'm going to ignore the fact that, yeah, they both jumped the creek at the same time. Again, people will say they're not the same. I get it, but they're certainly linked, right? They jump the creeks at the same time. It's the same thing here. Like they both had their own separate patterns. I get that. They're in different places, but they moved at the same time. Like they left their trends behind, right? This is a little later, but I'm like, that's kind of interesting. And I when I did that measurement, what I found was perplexing because it actually, the next bottom is indeed April 4th. That's an equal part measurement. Oh, well, that's easy. Anyone could have figured that out, I guess. But up until now, I haven't really used that because I was using it on GameStop. I decided I would try to use it on AMC. Again, just like, okay, these had literally like, 8-week upward cycles here. 1, 2, 3, and they're very even. I thought the increments would be the exact same on AMC, but they're not. They're slightly different. And it explains, if you do the measurement, so then I took that box and I just copied it over here. It actually explains why this stops earlier than GameStop. Because even though they both have a creek jump around October, late October, AMC actually had bottomed and started an earlier move, and it ends the move earlier as well. So weirdly, even though, again, here you're like, well, they're still both in an upcycle at the same time, they're slightly stagnated, like they're slightly different. It also explains why, to some degree, we saw GameStop doing some really weird stuff leading into that April deadline. It's not quite 1-to-1. Like it's a little bit off, but it's pretty dang close. So I was like, all right, well, that explains why GameStop continued till the 30th, whereas AMC had already moved and was already going in an uptrend. It ended early. It's the same amount of time. Weirdly. So I'm thinking to myself, well, surely it could not have been the same. And I was surely wrong. It is exactly the same. So then I went back and I looked at this. This is the same block of time. This is like as hard-nosed cycle theory as you're going to get from me, because I don't normally do this kind of thing where I'm looking specifically at up kind of cycles, but that's what this is. Up cycle, down cycle, up cycle, down cycle, up cycle, down cycle. It's very straightforward and not at all connected, in my opinion, to earnings. I don't see it as connected. Granted, it's interesting that there's a green earnings on at least 2 of these 3, but otherwise they're not connected. Like they're not specifically based on earnings reports. These earnings reports are kind of in the midst of downward cycles. Hard to say why, again, that might be the case, but it is. Here's where we get to the interesting part that you probably are most curious about, which is, when does the next cycle start? I thought it had already started, because I was looking at a 2-year thing, and I'm like, well, the 2-year thing starts in September. So September 11th or thereabouts, you'll start a new cycle. I've been saying that for a while. I said sometime between August 25th and September 11th. You can see that on September 10th into the 11th, we hop this first creek. Great. Very good, Booksy. I applaud that you got one timing aspect correct, because you're usually wrong. So then we move on, right? Like, that's it. Now what? Kind of, we're like, all right, now what? All right, we started it, but then nothing happened, right? Well, we built out, we back-tested supports. We had this kind of push-up that looked a little bit like a strength signal, but then we sweep back down, and we're doing like a back test, an official back test. I was really bothered that we didn't backtest 279. We've come really close to it again, but again, did not touch it. I do not know why. There is some striking similarity. Some of you guys are going to notice this. This is kind of the bear side of me coming out. There are some striking similarities to what we see right here. I don't think that it's possible to ignore it. I think you have to just take it with a grain of salt, right? There are certainly some striking similarities to what we see here. All right, but I'm going to tell you why this could happen, but also why it doesn't necessarily have to happen first of all, yes, the downward cycle ended much the same with a slump that would be seen as a strength test. And if it comes back above the creek, then you could build out. However, one key difference here is that we don't know from on a macro standpoint that this is actually an S curve into a downward wave. I've drawn it before, and you could suggest that it certainly could be, and you break down here. And this is where we run the risk of the same thing that you have here, where it pops a little bit and then dumps. AMC would pop a little bit here, probably go up to like 315 or something. And if it doesn't continue, if you get, again, these dramatic pullbacks, let's say it's pretty similar to what we see back here, you might even get to that 350, 360 area within that time frame, which is the very area that I've been saying, like, I don't want to get stuck there, right? We've been talking about that a lot. Like, I don't want to get stuck at 350. That would be really crappy. That's what it looks like. Okay? And then, yeah, you go into like a downward cycle potentially where you're essentially just crapping out if it drops below here. It's the same thing, though, as GME, where even if that were to happen here, you really can't assume that it's definitely going to drop. You might say that there's a really good case for it if it sails off and it can advance. But if this stays a little bit low and doesn't go like way ridiculous high here, if this stays a little bit low and it holds on, it could just be an M cross to the upside. Every time there's an M, there's a possibility of an S curve, and it doesn't matter if it's up or down. Anytime you see it, there's a possibility it's going to cross down or it's going to cross back up. And you really can't say for sure unless you can see it on a bigger picture and you have a really good case for it, maybe on a bigger scale, what may happen. So right here, I would see this, if something like this occurred, I would see this as very similar to what we saw here. But the question that I would have is, does it break down? And I don't know yet, right? Because in theory, the next move should go to 330. I'm actually thinking that Monday we may actually be up at 330. I'm being genuine about that because each of these has stagnated evenly so far. Another thing I did measurement wise, and then again, this upcycle actually starts here, which is weird, on Monday. And I kind of just skirted around that. But that's actually where the next one starts. You don't have to take my word for it. Go do the measurement yourself and just check it out. It's the same exact measurement 1, 2, 3 times, and then they're evenly spaced. The next one is, I kid you not, Monday the 29th. That is inconsistent with what I've said before because I didn't think that was going to matter. Like, I didn't think the 29th by itself was super important or anything like that. When you look at something like the RSI or whatever, you definitely can see why that makes sense. I mean, there's not much to it. It just looks like it jumped up. It's holding up. It should push again. So this would start a major upcycle. If it pushes up to the top, my biggest concern right now is what already happened here, which is that you see these parallels going up, the ones that are repeated, that we don't actually get into that groove. If we get stuck here underneath them again, and I think this one may actually breach them. It may need to if it's going to go over this top. We don't know that it's going to do that, but if it does go over this top, it may need to hit into there. So far, we haven't really had a lot of positive, like, this is definitely happening kind of motion yet. We've had a lot of, yeah, this looks good. It's pretty straightforward, like simple, looks fine. We don't see it as a full breakdown or a full breakout yet. We're just kind of in the middle. Things are moving along. But these waves have actually been incrementally very even, which I find to be kind of curious. If you look at where these tops are, you see that middle? That's the very first creek that got jumped here, right there. So from like this peak through the creek cross to the next peak, I did this again and I thought, well, maybe it's the same one in this case. Both of these jumped at the same time. But I thought, well, maybe it's the same, right? And you can see this push out is a little later than I'm saying. It actually looks like the third. So like the peak would be the third, presumably. Now that doesn't add up. You're like, hey, that's not saying you're going to pop Monday. It says you're going to pop on the third. Well, we don't know exactly what this means. All we're doing is estimating based on waves. That's it. So wave up, 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 up. You know what I mean? Like we're just taking it in stride. They're not matching perfectly because they're different time frames of cycles, and I don't really know if we can match them perfectly. But I would suggest that this does make sense because if you look at the next top, which is up here at 325, and you look at the intersection here that we're running, we are running parallel to those parallels that I drew. We're still in like kind of a similar motion. We would need to see it break above, and maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it doesn't actually go. Maybe it's down Monday and then it starts going. Does that make sense? As opposed to just going. I hope that makes sense. So Monday we could be lower and back at like 279 and then build out into Tuesday. It wouldn't make any real difference to me. I'm just saying that that's where the sort of the bottom of the cycle is, right? So no matter where you are, that should be roughly where it starts. I mean, that's what we saw here in the previous times. How did they know that it was going to be this date? I don't know, but they just do. So yeah, roughly here it starts. We don't know exactly if it's going to end in perfect synchronization, but it would presume that if this is going very regularly and it's not breaking out immediately, again, this is a very like tempered expectation kind of view, that you probably would not pass this area. You probably would not pass 330 next week. That would be really similar to what we're saying here with GME, that you do have a push up, but it's only going to go from like 28 to 31. Again, tempered expectations. That's the key thing here, is that this is saying that like nothing changes. There is no operator intervention where they're deciding to change character and break out and run. Okay? We're not doing that. We're just talking about, it starts a new upward motion and it continues as it has in the past. What does that look like? This would just go up to here, and then you'd basically have a similar backup story where you're backing up to 3, right? Instead of GameStop, which is backing up probably again to this like 2650 area we're at now, and then consolidating around 2750. All of this is like, you're like, well, yeah, but that's really slow, isn't it? I know, but this is why it's kind of genius and it's kind of frustrating at the same time, because if AMC and GME are both doing upward movement cycles in a similar fashion, you're probably not really dropping very much. You're going more or less sideways in this period with big swings until about November. And in both cases, you get to about this mid-November or early November, around the 10th or so, and then things start changing. And that does line up with what we see here, even though the timing is different, right? It does line up with what we see here. This is November 10th. This is the same time that we have at this intersection right here that we were just talking about on GameStop. Well, that's not good, Booksy. I wanted to be up high, my calls, blah, 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 blah. What happened to this big run up, right? Well, here's the thing. Even though you can sit here and illustrate this as if it's bearish, which is what I'm doing, where it kind of continues to push up, but it never breaks this marker right here, right? So it does have like some pretty significant swings in it. It would have like a 50-50 to the upside probably. There'd be some decent motion there, but it would take a long time, like most of October. And then by the time you get to the end of October or early November, you might get one more push up to 360 and then it's dead, right? That's not what we want. None of that is what we want. Already, without me having to go any further than this, already I can tell you that this initial push up is slow, because even though I don't think it's broken anything yet, we haven't seen that jump. We did not see that jump up above 320. We did not break out, and we did not re-enter, and this is really important. We did not re-enter this upward cycle. Like, you have to get back into these upward motions, and we're not doing it. That's more similar thus far, outside again of operator intervention, which could happen as soon as Monday. That's much more similar to what we saw here, where there's a refusal to kind of break back into the higher uptrends. Like the uptrends that are there that you see here are there, but we never got back to them. We just kind of stayed, right? Until we hit what? Well, until we hit like a distribution point where we're ready to now sell down again, you know? End of story. Well, why would we stop here, you know, instead of going all the way up? I don't really have a good answer for that, other than just to say, like, again, if it held up here, it's possible it could still have another big move. You could hit $4 over here in November and then sell down. This is just a big widening, right? After a narrowing, now it's widening. This is really not that different than what we saw back here, where there's a narrowing in and a widening out, and eventually it distributes. If that's the goal. If the goal is just to not run it, okay? So I'm seeing that more clearly now, and I think that it's interesting to me because I was like, well, I think at first I was pretty sure that we needed to see this big move, and now I'm like, okay, so what we're really doing is we're just kind of dancing around key levels, marking them off. We marked off 3 pretty religiously back here for a few days this week. We've come down. We haven't really hit that 279 bottom, but I guess you could say it's close enough. It made a higher low. That's a good thing. But this is starting to look really eerily similar, right, to that early distribution that we had in December. The difference is like what happens when you get to the creek, because one thing that you could not say back here, and this is extremely different, so I need you to hear me on this. One thing that you could not say back here was that we were doing this across the main downtrend. We were not. So we were doing it across parts of it. Like at the very end here, you can see we pushed up. Those are the last 2 points, 0.1, 0.2 right here. You can certainly see we did parts of it. But on the big picture, like now that we've generated that top, we can see like, yeah, but this is a little different because at this point, if you were to do that, even 1-to-1, you're going across the creek. There's no way to do this way without being, again, elevated across the creek. And if you do make the higher push after making the low here and the retest, that means that unlike what we saw, and this is very important, unlike what we saw back here, you would have to hold the creek, no doubt about it. This one did not. It failed and ultimately failed right here when it came down into January. It may be a little bit difficult to see that, but if you go back in retrospect, you can see the drop right there that happened. There was the main downward trend. It broke out, and then it came back below it. This is like a different type of trend. This is a macro trend that ultimately has been tested and tested and tested. If it breaks out here and then it backs up, even if it's not the strongest looking move in the world, just like GameStop, this does not mean that it has to come down. If it just depends on what guys, you guys are like, well, this isn't very helpful. You're just giving me a bunch of what ifs. I'm saying that if we see something like this going into November and we don't get these big moves, it's very regular. It doesn't mean that it's all doom and gloom. Probably it's an effective way to screw over both shorts who think it's going to drop immediately and just start going down, and bulls who think it's going to run up like we did, right? Think it's going to run up really far. This would be a really easy way to kind of keep it from moving. What I've been seeing on volume has looked like operator let go. Like they inject some volume and then just let it go. Inject some volume, let it go. It's good that it's holding up. But ultimately, I don't want to see something that just looks like a bunch of shorts covering and then slowly re-entering their position as retail buys in. I don't want to see that, right? In addition to that, we also have an ice level of sorts for AMC, which goes back to, again, this April bottom. There's two markers here, early April and April 29th. That right now, we haven't broken above it. I don't know if you can see that one as well. I know that there's a bajillion different marks on this chart. I get it. Don't ever chart like this, right? That's what the people always say. You shouldn't chart this way. But I think it's very important. This is very similar to what we see on AMC, or excuse me, on GME with this same idea, right? If you get above that marker and above the creek, above the ice and above the creek, and you hold it, it's very strong. Like, that's almost always a huge run. If you get something like this with the cat ear, that's where the M cross is going to happen. If it doesn't break down early, and then usually that ends up being a pivot. It's kind of the opposite. It ends up being like a low as opposed to like the place you hold. This looks the same to me. I'm like, yeah, it's very similar. You have, and even if you did the one that's after the creek jump, I did both of them because I wasn't sure. Both of them, and I was like, yeah, it makes sense. Like, this is pretty much on point. I mean, it's what you would expect, right? If there's an attempt to run the stock and then it fails, it'd have to come back through here and here. There'd be a double creek drop, and then it would come low. And again, that doesn't mean that it necessarily has to be the end of the world, like end times or something. It could just be a retest of 240s to start. That's typical. You can see the downward trend that we have right here. Similarly, it doesn't go that low. If you're looking at November, it really only hits like 254, which is back to these levels. So reasonably speaking, yeah, like GameStop has one that goes down to 18. AMC certainly has a possibility that if it just rejected really early, like it never gets above this area right here around 315, I think it could go pretty low. And we've talked about twos. We talked about 180s. It certainly could make a lower low. That's not a question in my mind. But until this happens, I don't really think you can definitely say for sure. Now, what's curious is that you're probably like wondering, what's curious is that the timing of the bullish move that I had is actually the same, which I find to be very striking, although it's inverted, right? But it basically ended on November 10th. Now, I think that's pretty bizarre that there seemed to be a setup that went from, again, this area October 6th to November 10th, that this would be like kind of your backup period after a big run. But you guys are like, well, wait a minute. That's not the case, though. You said it's all upside. I don't know. Maybe we're going to be up there at November 10th. Maybe we're already going to hit the top up here at November 10th. I don't know. But what I can say is that there's a bigger wave here. And this is where I was like, oh, I need to probably do a video because I haven't figured, like, you haven't figured anything out. Why are you telling us anything? All right. So we've explored enough of what a distribution would look like in this region, I think, at this point, and it's basically just a failure to re-advance above these trends that are going up. I think that's as simple as you can put it. And then ultimately, even if it gets the creek jump, which is, again, highly unusual, even if it gets the creek jump, if it fails, then yeah, you could go pretty low. And you have to remember, on the big picture, this could be perceived as a gigantic set of cat ears, for sure. I think the more unusual part of that would be the fact that we had this huge push up early on. But ever since then, we've been pretty much just dancing along the line. So it doesn't strike me as odd to think that this is where the drama happens. It makes sense to me. If you were going to sell back down, you would push up here. You'd get a bunch of people buying in, getting really excited. You'd hike up on balance, and then you drop it. But didn't we already do that? I thought you said we already did that. Well, we did do it. We did hike up on balance. They did drop it. It's possible we're just kind of repeating the same ideas, and we're just going in circles like a hamster. But I do think it's interesting that this upcycle starts Monday. I do think it's very important. This is where I'm going to get to like the controversy part. So all I've talked about so far is, okay, there's a probability that next week we start a movement up. That's pretty decent chance in my mind. But there's also this problem of bigger waves, right? So the immediate person who's kind of critical of all this stuff would probably look at this and suggest that it's already like lost its major wave. It's not going to go back up. The thing about AMC that is always maybe the most baffling of realities is that often is going the opposite direction of the wave. And it becomes a kind of counterintuitive motion. Now, you might say that happens all over the place, and you'd be right. In the event of a liquidity test, there may need to be a catalyst. I don't know. But I will say that this is pretty common for AMC. It's also worth noting that even though that's a possibility, it does not mean it's inevitable. So you can't just sit there and say, well, it does this every time. It doesn't do it every time. The reason I'm bringing this up is because when I did a bigger wave measure here, I came up with a really similar time frame, but it was like October 6th. I found October 6th on AMC multiple times, and there were high targets up here around 6 with trajectories as well. The reason I find that to be curious is because that's not a lot of time. That's a really small window. If you look at the overlap of that time, it's 1 week, right? Monday the 29th through Monday the 6th. So on the one hand, you have this kind of feels very firm, at least for now. I mean, I guess it could be a week off this time, but you have an extremely tight upward cycle motion. It doesn't mean it's going to necessarily blow up either. I mean, some of these go up, down, and then back up again. They're actually pretty much all like that. If you look carefully, you can see the up, down, up again, up, down, up again, up, down, up again. There's a sell-off in the middle, which makes sense because it's like, well, why are we seeing this as a low point? And you guys are like, oh, maybe this is the sell-off in the middle, right? Yeah. So there seems to be, at least in my view, a very clear indication that if you are not poorly positioned, and by that I mean that you have stuff like in the money calls or things like that, you're probably going to do pretty well for the most part from now until about November. I can't promise that. God forbid this thing just flips and goes the other way. Obviously that would suck. But at least for now, assuming that this is cyclically is correct, this should actually be an upward period. It does not, however, guarantee the height of that move because at the end of the day, I don't know whether this thing with GameStop is going to cause problems with upside. What I can say is that there seems to be an extremely tight window of time here that is 1 week. And that is Monday to Monday of this next week. There would have to be, and you guys are like, well, yeah, but we don't know how high it's going to go. You can't say it. Well, look, all I can tell you is that I've done this a bunch of different ways. I know what I know. I know what's possible. I know that some things are not likely. I know some things are more likely. I would suggest to you that it's not as likely that it's going to go all the way up to 15 in one fell swoop. That doesn't seem very likely to me. But looking back at this, I don't see it as a huge stretch of the imagination if midway through these cycles, we're actually seeing quite a lot of kind of like a pump movement, a dump movement, and then a final pump movement, right? And it's happening, again, very much in a methodical kind of, I use the word religious, but it's just this very straightforward way where there's like a very clear and evident path of like up, down, up again. I don't see it as unrealistic that it's something like this first cycle. I just caution because I'm looking at it. I'm like, yeah, in theory, it could be almost identical to this. If this were to go in the same exact manner to the upside, it's not a big stretch of the imagination. If this pushes up high and it goes to like $4 and then it just consolidates in the middle in October, okay, we get our crappy October like everybody's expecting, and then November comes and it's breaking out. Really, it's the same as what happened back here. And all I did was just shift it to where we are now. And you can see I didn't change anything else. I just shifted it to where we are now. And you can see it's actually the same motion, but up into that finally, right? Which we need to do, get up into those parallels and then start pushing. It's actually highly consistent. You can see like that hit right there versus this hit right here, and then back down again, and then the next one being the push to this top, right? Now, in the middle there, as you're very well aware, I'm sure, you have this huge spike. And we've debated this before, but I've kind of said it more than a couple times now. If you look back at January, there is a 1, 2, 3 motion. Excuse me, if you look back at 2020, there is a 1, 2, 3 motion after the first bottom. It's just low. It doesn't go this high on the first. It does like a 1, and then it comes back up and it goes 2, 3. And it does something really, really similar. It's just that the first motion itself is not super huge, but it's there, right? And we even get the backup here. It's not like it didn't back up. And it ended up being like where it was supposed to be, I would say, in terms of like levels. It's right where, like in that pocket. Most of the trajectories don't aim high. There's only a few that suggested it could have come way back up here. Most of them suggested that it was going to be in this area right here around the 550s. And that remains the same today. I mean, you can go back and look at them all. They're not ridiculously high. They're intersecting, they're triangulating. I'll show you really quick. They're triangulating this level like there. And each one of these triangulations, they're not going like ridiculous high, is what I'm trying to say. Like they really were looking at this marker right here. And we come back to it, and it does kind of build out underneath it. So there is the thought in my mind that like, what if like all of this stuff in some ways is kind of right? You're like, well, that's convenient. No, I mean like seriously though, what if in some ways this is all kind of right, where we're just not able to predict what we can't predict? Like the concept here of the first build out taking longer would be kind of crappy if you were really hoping that this thing was going to explode and just go. Obviously that would be kind of crappy, but it would make sense from a level standpoint to kind of build out right here between 360 and 420 and then go maybe at a later time when the market's in a better place going into November. And I believe, again, we have possibility of multiple rate cuts this year. So this not just the December one, right? It's possible that you get a big move at that point. It's potential, I should just say, that you do get a big move at that point. We do hit those high marks, right? And then we're kind of left right here for that mid-ground area that we were expecting. That's also a possibility. This is not something that really had occurred to me until today because I was thinking about one and done or not at all. There's kind of a mix match here of ideas, and I get that. But albeit this would be weird to like completely miss this and be completely off, I timed it out as best I could, and I timed it out to being the middle around January 10th. And again, that gives me October 6th. But if I have to be judicious about it and just say, well, what if I'm wrong? The only other two dates that I would pick, one would be the return back up, which is right here on January 21st. That actually gives me a much farther date out. That's like October 20th. It adds up really fast. So that's an extremely big difference, you know. In my mind, I'm like, yeah, I have more than 2 weeks. It's kind of a lot. It's basically a 2-week addition. And then I'm not going to use this one. I don't think this is the appropriate midpoint. But then again, later in December, and it's like, man, those two upward motions right there are way, way, way further on. And so anything in between those is just in between them. That doesn't really help us, does it? It just kind of gives us a really big window of like, well, shouldn't be in calls unless they're January calls, basically. That's the way you'd feel about it. This other cycle, however, does make it seem like narrowing it down is possible, because this cycle does not really give me the impression that it's going to be down, does it? Like, it wouldn't be still going up at that time. It would be done with whatever it's going to do by the 11th. So I find it to be kind of curious. I'm not suggesting it's going to be one-to-one with this per se. There's also big question marks about what does this mean? Because you've got these are really big spikes low. We don't have a spike low. We just have a dip right here. Is a back test or a test on a floor a good place to start a run? Yes. Is it possible that Monday, for whatever reason, who knows, we open up down here at 237 and then we just run? Yes. It's possible. I don't know why anyone would question anything in the market that's possible or not possible. The ideas here is like, I'm not in control. I don't know what the operator wants to do. But I will say that there is a very small window, at least for the initial probabilities that I have. If I'm wrong, I might be wrong by about 2 weeks. I think that's about as much room as I'm going to give it, and then I'm going to give up on that, because I think that this is by itself pretty strict. This bigger one is really difficult, because if I pick something slightly off, it's going to be huge differences all of a sudden. And that doesn't help anybody. That doesn't help me, doesn't help you. It's like, at that point, it's just way out there, right? Oh, you change it by a week or two here, it's going to change it by a month here. And I think that the smaller cycles, these are pretty dang strict, and this starts Monday. What if we're just dumping Monday and you're wrong? Well, I don't know what to tell you. Then I was wrong. I hope that doesn't happen, but hope doesn't really matter in the market. You can ask my account this week. I went red this week for the first time on my trades, so it was my first red week. I wasn't happy about it. Mostly because that tech sell-off that happened with the GDP news. GDP was stronger than expected. And people, I guess they think whatever they want to think about it. They think that it means that the rate cuts aren't going to be here. So, but I'm at the same time, I'm like, well, why are we, if we're that overpriced, why are we doing that? They were definitely in need of a pullback anyways. Yeah, and I should not have continued playing upside on some of these tech stocks, and I got burned. So got burned multiple times this week, unfortunately. That's just live and learn kind of moment. I'm gonna have a pretty big setback in my goals, but I'm gonna just reset and keep going. October might be a bit of a slump, so I'm not sure what to do with that yet. But anyways, this wave, I don't think this wave doesn't exist. I think it does exist. I think it's a very important that we get above, at the end of the day, we get above this like 330 area, but it has to be sooner than later if we're going to re-enter and basically break out and run up through these channels. I don't think in my brain, like, I never think in terms of this kind of stuff. I really don't. So I'm sitting here saying that I don't think we're going to be flying to $16 next week. That would be crazy, awesome, and fun, but I don't think that, and that just doesn't occur to me, that that's a very reasonable thing. I don't know why it would occur to anybody. Even back here, people do often say, well, you did call that, and there's proof of it. I don't have to like prove it. I had a chart at the time where I said I thought it would go up right here. But here's the thing. That chart didn't look like this. What that chart looked like was a push here and then like a backup. And it actually looked a lot more like what we saw in, oddly, I thought it was going to like do kind of a stair step out and then go up. Something like this. And it ended up being like a 2-day event, right? So was I positioned really well? Sure. Did I have any expectation that it was going to fly 300% or whatever it did in like 2 days? No. Did I think it was going to go to $14? Yeah, I did. It didn't even hit that much. And that's still part of the narrative for me, is like it never got there, right? But it's like the idea that it was going to go all at once just didn't occur to me. So if you went back and looked at that chart, you'd see I have like a marker up, and then I did like a bigger one where it was like coming up slowly and then breaking back up here and going. It's kind of a 1-2. I guess the easier way to describe it would be like this. Something like that. I thought it was going to take like a month or two. This is the same. I see this in the same vein. Like, I'm preparing for these kind of lower motion opportunities because I don't think that it's wise to just see it going straight up. I also don't really want, if we're really breaking out here, I don't really want to see some massive like upthrust sweeping candle that just climbs up and then dumps all the way back down. I just don't really want to see it. So part of me almost hopefully wants this to sort of slow down, hit like 7 or something, then rebuild, and then do it again. I would not be opposed to the idea, if you think that this is indeed like a 1-2 wave, the idea that this could indeed go beyond 6 or something at a later time. If it were going to happen, it'd probably be a secondary move that would happen towards the end of, towards the November date, which I know there's an earnings somewhere around there for AMC. It might be on like the 3rd or something. I don't know. This would be fine. I wouldn't see this as a negative either. And I do think we could see that 1960, which is like right here. Actually, it looks like 1955 on November 10th. That's pretty cool. So certainly there's a possibility if it's a 1-2 and it's a long time period wave, that's what you see. Here's where maybe the takeaway is from a trading standpoint. If it's low and slow, I think that you're better off just playing on the side of caution at this point. And if we don't get a lot of volume and we don't see a really big push, and I do think in some ways it needs to be like a 1 week kind of massive push. If we're going to go up that far, I can never in my right mind think it's going to happen in 2 days. You know, I just can't see it. So if we're going to go up that far and we're going to bypass the range after we jump this creek, and we're not going to stall out here and go down for another low, another liquidity test low, then we really need to see it move very quickly. So here's my thought, all right? And I know it's going to sound a bit crazy to a lot of people, but I genuinely think like one of two things is going to happen. And that's pretty much it for next week. I'm not going to include a bearish outlook where it just dumps down or does like a quick spring. I can't anticipate that. It's possible. You can see we worked our way out of, it's not impossible is what I'm trying to say. It's like definitely a possibility. You can see we worked our way out of this trend. So like, could it be that this is like a hook and it's going to like dump really far Monday? Yeah. Keep that in the back of your brain. It's very possible we have a really red Monday to start. So not saying it's going to be green Monday. I'm saying it's very possible we have a really strong dump Monday. But I would suggest to you that there's about a 1 week window here for upside. And then after that, no matter where we are, I think in the grand scheme of things, I'm going to have to just kind of default, just say that like that's probably going to be the bigger move for the week. I think if we end up high, it's going to be way up here. And I'm genuinely being serious about this. I can't stress how much time has gone on without kind of alleviating some of that buy pressure, and then also this macro wave finishing. I can't stress how it's not going to be a small move when it finally kind of alleviates that pressure. Like it's not going to be a small thing. When we have long form like press down like this, and it goes pretty darn fast. And I also don't think that there's a reasonable explanation beyond a markup. So I'm not looking at this like, oh, it's a short squeeze and all this other stuff. I genuinely think it's just operator markup is what I think. So I believe that it's very possible it hits like 670 within about a week, which is insane. I would not bet the house on it, but I will say that it's there. That's the creek breakout. It's a macro creek breakout. You can say you don't think it's going to move that far, but it's really one or the other to me. It's either it breaks out and it's a huge fanfare, or it's not. And if it's not, then I'd have to suggest to you that the operators are not risk on yet, and this has not yet received any of the dispersion. I've mentioned that previously, that GameStop and AMC are late to the party usually. And I think that they're basically like high risk assets. So they get bought up when the market finds a little more surety. Right now, that may not happen. If the market's really unsure about where to go, the laggards, the ones that are falling behind, aren't going to get the boost that they maybe should get, in which case they're probably going to slump and be really boring for a while, and then all of a sudden they're going to rip right when they finally do. That's this scenario. So if we get stuck beneath 324 and then slowly we're backing up, I'm just going to suggest to you that I wouldn't count on a huge move to 6 for a while. And I know that's going to bum people out because you're like, well, so you're just saying it's going to move like 20%? I mean, it's a big move, but it's not $6 big. And that's not what you were saying earlier. No, I know that. But you got to understand that, like, if it doesn't breach into these parallels, I won't confirm it. I'm not going to sit here and say it's going to go. And I do think it's going to be one of those moments where it's kind of all or nothing. Like, it's just going to go. And it's going to be really fast. And it's going to be a fun time when and if that happens. But it's not going to be like this. This is gradual, like sell-off kind of junk like we had back here. Where you get the injection of volume, but you get these deep sell-offs because they're basically just opening up short positions and they're not letting it go, right? We do not want to see that same thing here. So when I look at this, I know in my brain that if there's a markup, it's going to go up to this $5 to $6 area. It's not even a question. I've had people say, I think more recently, like, do you think it can run 100% in like a day or two? I'm like, I don't know about time, but I do know that the dollar value here is not complicated. If it's going to mark up and leave the range, it's not going to just leave the lower range. There's no reason to do that. The only pocket that we have still that hasn't really been traded yet is right here around 380 up to about 4. That's it. There's little red markers I got right here. That's the only pocket that hasn't been heavily traded. How long do you want to sit there? Are you going to sit there for months? I doubt it. AMC does tend to leave some pockets open. It just doesn't trade them. And that's true for any ticker. There's something illiquid about them where they're just being used as kind of like a sell-through zone, and they're just not really being used. I see that as roughly like a middle marker for the whole range right here. And it's just not really, I mean, I wouldn't say it's illiquid, but it's just not where people want to be. And it makes sense because why would you want to trade in the middle of a range? You probably want to trade on the top or the bottom. That's the more common thing. We've been on the bottom for a long time. Where's the top? It's up here, you know? It's up here. So like I don't see it as unrealistic because it's just where the numbers are. They're way up here. And something about GME as well is like this, none of this right here is a markup. So the way we were marking this up, this is not a markup. If we think AMC messed up. If you're kind of in the boat that you're like, you know what happens if AMC goes to like 6 or 7 and then it stays here? That doesn't sound very similar to what we saw on GameStop. But remember, these numbers are pretty different. We got $2.90 versus $29, right? Us going up to $6 could be the equivalent of, GameStop going up to like 60. We've been talking about the upside here, and we've been talking about the potential. GameStop's a lot more sideways, and we know that there's also those rising trends. It's sideways and it's rising, and AMC's been mostly downward and sideways, so there's a difference, right? But a similar motion on GameStop is not unfounded. It really isn't. The idea of going up to like 60 might seem like a lot too, until you remember like this was here not that long ago. We were in that same region back along. So for us to go into like quote unquote a markup, we don't have to go that high. I've said like 46 to 50 is probably pretty reasonable. But that's not that different than us going to $4, $5 on AMC. So for us to go up to that, and I'm doing it again slow-mo here, but for us to go up to suddenly, if this were to happen, it would be a very similar comparable move, right? Like technically you're still inside the buying climax area. You're not out of the range, but you are out of the range because the range itself was built on these hooks coming down. And ultimately where we stopped is like 32. So it makes sense to me that like, you know, if you did get a huge move on GME next week and AMC next week, that they both go to like these areas where you're not quite out, but you're definitely above that high liquidity, which is in my mind the top of the range. It's not really the top of the range is probably $5, weirdly enough. We chopped along it for a long time, but you can see ultimately it was used as a supply zone. It was never used as or has yet to be used as a support. So like $5 is totally normal. That's what I'm trying to say. Like it's a very simple move if you think it's going to mark up. It has nothing to do with me bringing up hyperbolic numbers. It's just where it is. Like that's where the top is. There are other levels in between, but that's where the top is. And like I think more or less it would trade around 570 and then break out around that same area, right around here, 570 to 6 kind of area to 650. That's really where the final motion would be. So anyways, so this is not all doom and gloom. It may seem like I'm presenting you with a very like crappy situation, but the big kind of takeaway here is that we haven't made the move yet. And I think that my expectations for AMC were pretty much in line with GME, but there is a slight difference in timing. And I'm curious now because it looks like from now until about November 10th, we would be in an upcycle period, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we don't get like a middle wave, for example. And I think it's very interesting because AMC and GME both have that same like middle wave structure around a similar time period, like halfway in between. They're basically just elaborate S curves, right? This is the most bizarre one, but it also has the same motion. If you ignore the huge first pop, it's the same motion. So I find it to be absolutely imperative that we see something similar to that here. And I think that's really where the rubber meets the road. It's just where does that happen? How high does it go on that push? Right now, it looks like nothing's happening. It definitely feels that way. I gotta say, before this thing takes off, there's not a lot going on here. It does have a little bit of a buy-in moment, but even this very first buy-in way back in May of 2024, even this first buy-in it's a pretty deep retracement. It's not particularly thrilling, and there's not that much volume in it. Go look at the volume in that push-up. It's so-so, This is the first buying volume. You can see it on the chart. It's like not even higher than it was back here right after earnings. It's pretty low. It's there. There's decent volume there, but it's very low and slow. And then you can see that deep retracement. I think we did that before. It's like 618 or a 7 or a 0.5 retracement. And then all of a sudden it's like boom, right? Oh, it's moving. And that would be the motion that we want to see if we're going to try to get to like a real breakout zone. And my bigger concern right now, and here's that cross up again. My bigger concern right now is that we need to see that push up it's almost like the second part of this, right? We really need to see that push up go pretty far. Yeah, because right now that volume is like dead. It's not even as much, again, as like what we saw back here. It's very similar in regards to like how exhausted it is. This range is so exhausted. Which makes sense, because if you're about to make a big move, you're not going to have a lot of volume left to trade in the range. You just don't. Read Wyckoff's theory about the end, and you'll see what I mean. There's the idea of satisfying or resolving a range, this concept of like coming back to the middle. There's very low volume. Then you have an operator move from the middle. It's like always this very boring end when you get to the end. Albeit that doesn't determine direction always. The reason that this, to me, it seems likely is that if you get these big swings like this, I think that's just a sign of distribution. I really don't want to see this, per se. I know you guys are like, well, that contradicts what you just said. I know. But I really want to see that. I really want to see that first move really take off. And like, yes, we are marking up. We are going to pass through this area. And you got to remember, like, these bigger waves are huge, We talked about this previously, but these are sizable markup motions. Like, look at that right there. I just drew it, and it's not even a question. Like, it's such a humongous cross down here as they just gapped down through it and just left it and didn't check anything. They didn't back test this trend. And look at where it goes. It goes to like $55. It's exactly like the pocket that we were thinking AMC's at like $5.50. So I'm not saying that this has to happen, but it's certainly like it's one extreme or the other. And I think if we get into this low and slow, there's not going to be in my opinion, there's not going to be a huge run until probably until December rate cuts, the third rate cut, if there is 3. Because I don't know what else you could do here. Like, there could be one in the middle, but October to November just doesn't look, if you get stuck, just doesn't look good. So you're saying we should all YOLO. I'm saying that outside of Monday, which we don't know if it's going to be really red or not, outside of Monday, I do think it's about to start an upswing. Undetected. If you take the 1 minute EA chart, lives changed to whoever was in EA. Overlaid over GME, you land on October 3rd, right after the 11-10 split, 1 day before warrants. Interesting. Again, higher risk assets getting some of the liquidity that the market's currently dumping, right, in these sell-offs for big tech. So diversification, I suppose. I don't know anything about XRP global payments, that kind of stuff. I don't do that kind of stuff, so I'm not the person to ask. The moral of the story, I suppose, is that next week is really important. And I think that if we get to a place of stagnation here, I just think it's not the greatest. Right now, I'm not as concerned about that because I see it as, again, just like we're just coming back above and we're starting to buy in and now we're backing up. If you look at the overall motion here, aside from the fact that it didn't breach those parallels, we're talking about AMC right now. Aside from the fact that it didn't breach those parallels, there's really not much bad to talk about. Like, it's making higher highs, it's pushing above each of the markers as it goes up. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. The next one up is like 330. That breaks the creek. So that's really the one that you have the most riding on. There's nothing else here that's particularly unsound. I wasn't super thrilled to see it come low again, but I knew that it had left unchecked. And I said that so many times on the Discord. I could not get it out of my head. I kept looking at that 279 like, why did they just like take off? You can see it back here on like the 12th. They just kind of like took off the 12th. That sounds really familiar. There was another chart that had the 12th as a really important takeoff moment. I thought I was backing up to it. But you can see they just took off on the 12th, and then they never came back. They just advanced, backed up a bit. And I thought it was just really awkward because it wasn't like I wanted to come lower. But they just didn't make the backup, which is strange. Like you can see it visibly on the chart. They just left it open. I find that to be very odd. It's just not normal. How important is it that they check every single level? When you're about to leave a range, it's very important. Stockfather once told me that pretty much every supply and demand spot that's hit on a downward motion has to be and will be rechecked on an upward motion. The only one here that didn't get checked was like this 279 area. It did check. You guys are like, it checked at 280. Who cares? I don't know if it matters. Maybe it won't matter in the end, but it really bothered me. It really bothered me that it didn't test it. So I left this on the chart, this trend right here, because I was like, maybe it's going to come back down to it and try to get to it later. And here we are. And I was bummed out here because I saw it test 287 and 291, which are also really critical levels in this zone. And they go all the way back to the original, like the very first breakout back in May. Those are the same levels, the 287 to 291 region. It's like the same exact region we found ourselves in at the end, right here. And you can see like 291 is where it broke out. But it had built out like right along this area, this little pocket from about 284 up to about 3. And you can see the rejection right here off of 3. If you can see, it looks all neon crazy. But you can see the rejection right here off 3, like the last day. It dropped from 3 and went down to 291, and then it just took off. I have other thoughts about that, but I'm not going to get into that. So anyways, this area is very, very important. And then locally, when we came down, we just checked all the same boxes right here when we first dropped in. This is the same as like that ledge that happened before April in 2024. It kind of eased in, dropped off of 304, and then it did its business. It sounds like I'm going to the bathroom, but it did its business around 291 down to 283. Well, that's the same area that we're back testing right now and trying to confirm this is indeed support. So for us to be down here is not a bad thing. I was trying to convey that as best as I could. Like, there's certainly like some problems. Like, I could find problems with it if I want to find problems with it. But on the whole, it's just a back test. So you're just going back and checking that liquidity after making an early advance here off the bottom. So if I have one more concern, it's that maybe we're going to drop down. Who knows? It could be end of the day today. It could be first thing Monday. Maybe we drop down and we hit 279 and we open at 279 Monday or something. Or we drop Monday at first and then we go up. I don't know. I'm not positive that it needs to happen. I could see it happening. It would not surprise me if it happened. The other two areas that maybe bugged me a little bit, one was here, there's a gap, and it was filled, so it's not like the gap itself is there. But it's interesting because we backed up to it and kind of double bottomed off of 275, but we left this 271 as well. So that's another one that I'm like, I could see why that could also play into it. If for some reason next week ends up being a crapshoot until Friday, which again doesn't necessarily make sense to me, but you could say maybe it's going to do that. It goes back down to this area. I don't know. That's the only other place that I can see locally where I'm like, that could be an issue. I think we left it on the table. I hope we don't go down to 271. I do. Where is the actual confirmation then? I don't know if you're going to see it. You may not see it in regular trading hours. The way these operators are, they're kind of jerks. One of them could indeed be like Monday the 6th. I mean, if it ends up being this bizarro one-day kind of event or two-day event, and it takes the whole of the first few days of the week and nothing happens, or we chop down, I definitely could see how that could be the $3 mark could end up being like the catalyst or the, not the catalyst, but that could end up being like kind of the breakout here. For whatever reason, I don't know. It comes down low and then it doesn't do anything until Monday or Friday into Monday next week. So it's a whole week away, a whole nother week of this garbage, right? For some reason that happens and this initial timing stuff, maybe it's right. Maybe it does drop, but then it just kind of chops all week. So we're like, okay, well, it's supposed to be starting, but we're not moving very fast. Again, totally possible. I could see this as a potential for a number of things. As we move along, you can see that we're starting to get closer and closer to that main intersection. And this 303, 304 area, I think, is really important. So it certainly is a possibility. It's starting to look like October 10th, right? At that point, it's like, man, I don't know what's going on. It's taking too long. It's dead in the water. We don't want to see this shouldering down until then. I don't think it would take that long, even if you use this as like a head and shoulder. I guess I could stretch it there, but I don't know, it feels really long-winded. So no, I'm not going to advocate YOLOing a bunch of calls. Wolf has really ticked me off. I'm not happy with Wolf right now. Pretty aggravated. Wolf is another one that burned me this week. I had I watched it wedge down, and I thought the wedge was going to break out, and it did. It broke out and ran up, but then it rejected off like the 236 retracement, and then it dropped back through the wedge, and it dumped really hard. It went down like 20% per day, and I didn't have a position that was savable, I should say. So I had an options contract, and it went to like zero like immediately. So I was like, well, that was bad. If it had recovered, it would have went back up, but it didn't. So I'm just waiting to see if it fills the gaps back to where it first gapped up. I would just do a fib retracement to that first bottom and just see where the fibs are. That's all there is to it. It could be fine. I just don't know when it's going to find a bottom. You know, that's a tough one. So anyways, yeah, I can't give you much else guidance on it. I'm pretty annoyed with it. I don't want to look at it. I'm pretty upset by that trade. Amongst others this week I didn't enjoy. So I've had a rough week. This has been a really bad week for me. This kind of stuff, yeah, I mean, it could right all the wrongs, I guess, but I don't really like counting on these huge plays. I want to make consistently good trades, and I have done that pretty well. First 5 weeks were all green, and then technically like the 6th week is still going. I think I'm in the 6th week right now. I say technically, I think I started on like a Thursday or Friday or something. But it's red. It's going to be bad. No, I'm sorry. This is the 7th week. So the first 6 weeks I had were green. But this is going to be a really bad week for me. My best week was week 5. And I think this is going to be close to erasing week 5, which is really bad. So just being honest. My hope is that it doesn't become a pattern, obviously. But I've been taking a lot of notes as to what I didn't do right and what I was counting on, but then didn't happen, and why that was not a good idea. Kind of like a journal, trading journal. I know better than some of the things that I did. I just kind of deer in the headlights for some stuff. But I also made the mistake of trying to chase some stuff down, and you shouldn't do that. Especially when the market's having uncertainty, just being a little too on the nose about it can be bad. Thinking that you're going to catch a knife or something. It wasn't even that. I actually did fine, because the first one I messed up was MU. I thought this was going to trade down, but I didn't think it wouldn't recover at all. So I thought it would have a drop here early in the week. After earnings, and it did. And so I actually bought here. I mean, we're kind of like dancing around that area, but like the thing is like I was waiting to see what happened in this zone, and I was looking for a more immediate recovery because you can't see it, but there's a gap down here. I was looking for a more immediate recovery. Well, you can see the problem with that, right? It's like long term, this could be breaking down like huge. We don't know. This is going to be a shallow S-curve and pop back up. Seemed likely that today or Monday it might be back up around 163, which is a good trade if you can catch a bottom, but it also made 2 consecutive like lower lows right here, which tells me that there's a decent chance this is going to try to go down first, which is sort of what's happening. And if it goes down first, we're talking about like maybe 150. That's really low. So weirdly, I actually did fine. I had a bit of a mishap, but then I was able to trade through it, and I had a 5% loss that I could have taken, and I didn't take it. And then the very next day it dropped. You can't see, this is all after hours stuff. But the next day it dropped this whole percent all in after hours. So I woke up just fuming, unhappy with myself because I didn't want to take the 5% loss. I don't know why. I guess I just thought like where it had landed at the end of the day, it's like fine tuning, right? And you could be right about 99%, but if you're wrong about that last 1%, you miss it. And I just had a feeling like it wasn't moving very far on high volume. I was like, maybe I should just get out. And I did not trust my instincts on it. Instead, I waited for the close. I thought the close would look okay. I thought it was going to drop to 160 and then bounce. And you can see that it did do the drop to 160, but it did in extended hours, of course, when I wasn't trading, and it ends up breaking down in pre-market. So it did do the drop that I thought it was going to do, but then it just breaks down and keeps going. And so by the time it opens, it's not even close to where it starts. There's nothing to do. Like, I knew it when it bounced. It's like it's going to keep going down. And then you're trapped, right? It was an effective bull trap that I got stuck in. I could have gotten out, and I didn't. And that's a big lesson learned. So big negative on this play. They're not expiring. I have some calls options that they're not expiring till next week, but at this point, I'm really just looking to see if there's even going to be a reaction, right? Why not just trade down? It's just liquidity. Like I had the thought to like open up some short positions today, but I went and checked and I was like, I don't really want to spend money on it. Not right now. I mean, sometimes it's a good idea, but yeah, this could be really nasty. You can see that walk down. If this does a full S curve, it's going to be going real low. Granted, most of this happened in extended hours. It went up to like 175. Regular trading hours, it never went above like 170. So this is all extended trading hours stuff. This is the one that goes back to the 12th. It's just like AMC. See, it looks like it's retracing back down to the 12th, like walking it back down here. Very head and shoulder like. It's missing some critical back tests. It's missing some things, but historically, MU has had really bad, really slow. I went back and checked. It's had really slow backups. And when it does do a big recovery, it tends to be extremely quick. So if it has like a 50% retracement before heading down, it's very fast. So right now it hasn't done anything retracement-wise. This is all just downtrend nonsense. And it looks like it could go pretty low. If and when it does retrace, I don't think it's going to be a great retracement. So I'm going to end up losing quite a bit on it. And there were a couple others like that this week. Just mostly tech stocks. They just got slammed. People are not convinced. I think Powell said something like he thinks that they're overvalued. And then I think it's the P&E ratio. That one's gone to like highs from like the dot-com bubble, and there's just all kinds of stuff. I don't see it as the same, and I don't know. Maybe it's just market jitters, but I don't see the AI stuff as the same as the dot-com stuff, but that's just me. Some people think it's going to be the same. It's a bubble or whatever. I feel like the valuations are way higher than, like, if you think about it, the potential valuations are extremely high. And we've already kind of priced in a lot of that, but like, think about the future, like 30, 40 years down the line. Like, this is not a fad technology. It's one that's going to be like built upon. And I know that the dot-com stuff was the same. You're like, well, maybe there'll be a change and it won't be worth as much. AI junk. I get it. But really, we're just in the first year and a half of like an AI. So it's like really bizarre to me. I don't know what it means, if the market should tank or shouldn't tank. I guess you could just stay out of tech stocks if you really don't want to trade them. So I've made a lot of money. I made my best trade in a tech stock. So you live and learn, I guess. Best trade and worst trade. Both have been in technology stocks. So anyways, kind of bummed about that. I don't really know how to feel about it other than just like crappy right now. Maybe next week I'll have fresh mind, but it's not fun losing money, you know. It's never fun. And especially when you feel like pretty confident in the trade and you feel like the setup is good. It's really frustrating to some degree when it doesn't go your way. I also think a big part of it is mindset. And like, I know when my brain is like foggy and not the best, it's not clicking, that I probably just shouldn't trade. Like if I had just sat on cash this week, I may have lost some on like longer options that are expiring or whatever here and there. Like I have a few little ones. I may not have made green, but it wouldn't have been like a huge loss. Instead, I decided that I should trade against those small losses to try to like win them back so I can have a green week. But that's dumb. Like you don't need to do that, you know? Especially if you're not, I haven't been sleeping very well. I've been all over the place. If you're like that, you probably should just not trade. And I'm learning that very quickly. Like the downswings are not good times for me to be trading because I'm not thinking as clearly. So I can manage like one crappy week, one really crappy week. I can't manage multiple crappy weeks. So I need to be really cautious and kind of reset in the weeks to come. If AMC and GME do take off, I said it last week, nothing really happened. But if AMC and GME do take off within the next week or so, I'll probably be sitting pretty happy with everything. GameStop was the only one I had some shorter term call options on. They're October 17th, so they're not like way short, but certainly if it took a long time or it didn't move very far, I could get burned pretty bad on those. That's not impossible. It's definitely a possibility. And AMC, everything I have, not including shares. I'm not talking about shares. Everything I have is long, like far out. I think the earliest stuff that I have is like December. And they're not really moving, so they've been mostly just kind of slumped. I'm not too concerned about them, to be honest. I think they'll do just fine if the stock moves. If it goes to like $6 or something, they're gonna be really, really fine. But we'll see. So, all right, I'm done. I think I gotta stop. I gotta do some other stuff today. So, if you guys are concerned or worried, just remember, like, you don't have a one size fits all here, but there is definitely like key levels that you can watch. And I think we've talked about them enough on the stream. So just remember those key levels where things matter the most. That's really where you want to see the big volume buy-ins and stuff. Everything right now could be amounted to just chop. It's not a clear picture. I haven't seen anything overtly, well, I've seen some things that are decently bullish, and I've seen some things that are semi-bearish, but nothing that's like really obvious, like, oh, it's going to definitely drop, or it's definitely going to run, right? I'm still leaning towards bull side because of the bigger picture. But I think that if operators wanted an opportunity, I think this whole October 3rd thing would probably be the opportunity. And people keep talking about and asking about stuff like dilution for AMC. And I think we've already kind of discussed that, but AMC doesn't allow, unless it's voted on, doesn't allow for dilution right now. They set out earlier in the year saying they were not going to do any more offerings after December. They weren't going to do any offerings for like 12 months or something. So maybe if they have a big move in November, if that ends up happening, or December, then maybe there will be a dilution. It causes the stock to come crashing back down to earth. I don't know. But yeah, I've heard that for the last like 5 months, and like everybody's like freaking out about dilution. I'm like, they definitely said it. So I know they had one time where they announced a vote for an offering, but it was a vote. I haven't heard anything about that. I didn't vote, so I don't know. It sounded like an investor approval thing. I mean, what else is there, you know? There's nothing else to it. So far, Adam Aaron has been true to his word. They've not done an outright huge share offering or anything since the last time. And I remember them announcing at earnings that they weren't going to do it. That was a while ago. October 6th and 7th might be the days, Monday and Tuesday, the 6th and the 7th. Yeah, perhaps. I didn't look at EA's chart. Well, we can look at that. Let's see. Webull and EXE kind of ticked me off. I got out of both of those too early. Webull looked pretty good on the big picture, but I got really worried it was going to drop really low in October. Electronic Arts, I thought they were like, holy moly. It's always fun to look at stuff like this. So what are we saying? Why are we saying EA is going to do the same thing? I mean, this is kind of like iterative motion right here. I would have expected GME to kind of go the same route, but it didn't do that. This is August. It's already been in an upward swing. You said if you take the 1 minute EA chart, overlay it over GME, you land on October 3rd. Why would I take a 1 minute chart though? It's really short, small time frame. And like how much time? This goes back to this year, but there's no obvious similarity between, let's see here. This is January, February, this is 2025. So then April is here, April 2025. May 15th. And then where's April 2024? I'm just thinking about dates in my brain. Well, I mean, April 2024 started a big uptrend, but it didn't last. I actually think this could probably go significantly higher. It looks like it's kind of entering into this area. If it can hold it, it has to hold it. There's a big M cross right there. 1, 2. You see the wave. It looks like it boiled down to like here, so. And I don't know about this. It never came back down again. It's kind of odd. Say like that right there. And 2, yep. And then this is also like a 1, 2. This is really tight. So this may actually not be done because it doesn't look like it finished. I'm just guessing. No, take it back. That's the middle of the 1-2 right there. So it may be about done. That's the big peak. So what we're probably seeing is we're seeing the exit trajectory now. Like the cycle's pretty much finished. Right there. Yeah. Roughly speaking. So what we're really looking at is is this. This is like your main wave. I was trying to like get it where I wanted it. It's probably done or close to it. So you can see this is where it's like building up, testing it, dropping it, testing, returning back. This is a really good one. This is an example of like that to some degree, that kind of like S curve that's going away from itself for a while. You see that? And see how it like pushes away? We were talking about this on like AMC. It looked like it's just going the wrong way. Like it's going to die. And you're like, when's it going to go back? It's not going back, right? It doesn't look like it's going to go back. It looks like it's just failing. And then it just immediately like zoop. All of a sudden. So if I had out on the chart at this time, like I think it's going to go up, and then it did something like this, you'd be like, I don't know. You know. It's always the way it is. And it probably used this as like an anchor. Yeah, for like a 50-50. It's like a pullback. It went way beyond that though. Reminds me a lot of that build out long time ago on AMC, but anyways, so yeah, this is that wave. The same thing, kind of pushed away from it and then went again to that trend. But, you know, for every example that we have of something like this, where this M turns into an S curve, which is what happened here. You can see it. It just did it again. For every example that you have of this, it's like you could probably find a dozen examples where it doesn't do that. That could have been a top, and then it would have come back down to, it would have come all the way back down to here if it had dropped low. See that? That would be your expectation. So, I mean, like, these are tough ones because I do think there's a certain amount of, like, technical, and even here, it made like a double low. There's certainly a kind of technical setup that you could kind of monitor for it, but if it jumps the creek and it holds it, you could just be in a buy-up period, you know. But I don't know if anyone could have seen this coming. You guys are like, well, some people did. I know. But on the basis of like news and all this other stuff, sure. But this is like a 4-top, and then it dropped. And it probably could have just as easily like hooked here, and that would have been like a 50-50 down, which would have been what I would be talking about if I had seen this at the time. I'm just being honest. It's the reversal and the news that just kind of sends it going. Because the rest of it just looks like it's going to chop down. In my opinion. They have a deal to go private, huh? Yeah, so I mean, it could go a little bit farther. I can't really tell. It's such a tiny little candle, you know. I don't really know what's going on. Somebody buying it up to exit their shares or what? Or it's just squeezing, shorts getting out of it. I really don't know. I'm curious as to why we would look at this and say that it's the same as GME, though. I think that was the question that I'm not really understanding. Like, because the person said, look at it on the 1 minute. You're talking about like this? I don't know, man. They're probably not here anymore. This is different. See, I didn't come back over the top. This is why I'm not so sure about where we are right now. And then also, when this jumped the creek, it just kind of held. So I don't really know what to say about that in terms of similarity. I kind of wish they had not said that and not explained it. I should have looked at it when they said it. This makes sense to me. This is like that rising accumulation after the drop. And then you pop and go. This is what we were talking about down here when you get this drop down. And if you get the buy ups, and it was buy up, buy up, buy up, it could be very positive if it makes the right moves after. You know, but in terms of a one-to-one comparison, I don't know about that. Maybe they're looking at that drop forward. I guess they're not here because they're not responding. So if anyone has any idea what they were probably talking about, let me know, because I really don't get it. Maybe again, this idea here forward. One of my cats is throwing up. Gross. Yeah, but I don't know what I'm supposed to be overlaying. From here forward, maybe. I'm not sure. You're not giving me a lot to go off of. Yeah, the 1 minute chart from what date to what date? Because you can only go so far on the 1 minute chart. If you're looking at a tiny little fractal versus like something big, I don't really know if that's a good idea. If we're talking about this time period from like August 11th on versus September 26th, which is like a day, that's a stretch. Just today. Yeah, it's not the same. The 24th. Okay, let's try it. I'm going to hold my tongue until we get it where we want to get it. So this drop forward. Where is it? Do you mean like back here? Or do you mean like this one? The drop that started on the 11th or the drop that started on the sell down? June 25th. This is very specific. June 2025. Oh, sorry. Yeah, this one. Okay. That's what I thought, but then I got confused. So why do we think this is similar? That's fine. No, I understand why you would say that, yeah. The month and day thing is switched up. Well, scaling these things is always tricky. So I'll put them up, I'll put it up above here. All right, so this doesn't have any break of the bottom until the very end. So the creek here is on the very, very tail end. Whereas this certainly did. I mean, I guess you could look at it like this if you want. I suppose there's two different ways to go about it, so I'll do it this way. So there's similarity there. And then the motion upward meets there. Motion upward meets there. I don't need to tell you like how low this is by comparison. I think you guys can see that. This is kind of different. There's a wedging action here, and it's lower lows, which is kind of unusual. This actually looks almost better. One of the problems, I guess you could say, is that this actually has a trend here that doesn't exist in this area, or I can't see it. So there's problematic zones there. But in both cases, you probably get a creek cross in a similar way. And then the rest of this is pretty different. I mean, so again, this has a peak, and then it basically just narrows in. It's almost the same as what we see down bottom. Whereas this is like a rise. You see the difference? See how it's like rising up? So you're getting like this kind of repetition of motion here. I'm really not trying to stretch this out. I'm just saying like it seems like that motion is very different than this, where it's got this kind of consolidatory, like it's following its own behavior. So it's got this downward motion, just like this had this more downward motion here until it breaks out and then it goes. But looking at this now, you can see that that jump happened much the same as the first. We just don't have any real comparison for that right now. We don't have anything. So if you're just looking at like timing, I certainly could see why, one might look at this and suggest that the timing's similar. I mean, you kind of get lost in the weeds when you do fractal stuff. I'm not a big fan of it. In some ways, this looks more like AMC does, right? Except this went down instead of up on AMC. I'm just not really feeling it. I get where it's going. I'm not saying it can't go up either, by the way. You're right. This looks like Monday the 6th. So I could see where that's coming from. We'd have to see the comparable creek cross, I guess, and like what happened in a similar way though. So behavior pattern, oopsie, I didn't mean to delete it. Behavior pattern is really important because operators are sometimes the same. Like could be Vanguard or BlackRock or something. You know, they'd be the same operator, but they may even as the same operator have like a different schematic because they run. You got to think they run like 10,000 or something ridiculous ETF funds and other junk. They've obviously got capabilities to like. It's not like 10,000, but it's some absurd number, right? Because they already have capabilities to have tons of different trading patterns and objectives, and it's not like any one of them is going to be the same, exact same. That's why I've said like on AMC and GME, they don't look the same, but they have very similar build out in terms of when they break out. No. Why do you do that? Why do you eat his food? I don't get it. Cats like eating my other cat's food. Some dominance thing. So, you know, comparably, I would say like this doesn't seem to have happened. If it did, this sell down right here would have to be kind of considered the same thing, and it's already like doing something pretty reactive. It'd be like this came all the way back up, right? You can see that motion. So if it were to continue to iterate, remember what we were talking about with iteration? That's again behavior. That's one right there. Two is this one right here. I did it backwards. And then I think at that point it starts getting really messy because the iterations kind of shift. And I'd say that they really became more like micro size iterations. You start losing all form and function right around here, and it starts doing like crazy stuff. That's why I thought probably the 28th or 29th, it just kind of fails and then goes up. So if we saw something similar to that, and that's the first iteration, the second iteration might be really, really steep. It may not, these kind of flattened out a little bit, but it may still be that the iterations are kind of building up. So it's going to be really difficult to tell. And it's almost like, yeah, I could see it dropping here. Honestly, I could see it coming back to the floor. I mean, if you look at what happened after these breakouts, the initial floor doesn't even hold in some cases, which is kind of a weakness. But you can see there's an attempt to kind of regulate above. So either way, I don't find the comparison overly noteworthy. And then I also kind of look back and see where this was on EA, because it's more important to remember like proportionally like what's going on here. So this had gone up and bonked its head on that previous bottom, right? And then it backs up, holds the support, and runs by jumping over it. And that was really the only moment that you had right there of, and how do you know? I don't even know how you would catch that. That would have been the moment to sort of say, yeah, it's going, even if it did all this, which is great. So for us on GME, it's definitely different. We don't have a floor. Let me double check here. And this was like the higher range. So I probably would put it here because this is where I had it before, but we never even came up to it. I had it at like 28. I mean, it's possible. I guess it got somewhere here, right? It's a repeating marker. This guy. It harkens back to these two, and that's why I did that comparison earlier today. These are the same regions. So it's done this before. It's had a similar kind of push up, try to push through it. By comparison right now, this looks pretty weak. If anything, you would say maybe it's only done this. But again, it's like the operator is not showing their hand. It sort of becomes the same point again of we just don't know if it's going to stop here and like have a big retracement, what's needed. So on the one hand, yeah, we could suggest that maybe this needs to just have a creek breakout. In which case, we haven't gotten it yet. It'd be this guy. So if you're watching it from that point of view, you might suggest this goes up until like Wednesday, and then it starts getting like ridiculous again. Again, just from the point of view of like a operator standpoint kind of thing. And then this would be like your back test into Monday, something like that. So I don't think that's impossible. That definitely seems right to me as well. We didn't really look at anything micro today, so I wasn't really looking at this at all. It looks like it came back to there. Just like AMC had that backup here on those first two waves, it's the same backup right there. So that's fine. And then the danger for AMC was if it rejects, is going to be going down pretty low. Like we're talking about back here around, this is the lowest I could see it really going. Either the 12th or the 8th. And I believe this is probably similar. This is the gap up right here on the 10th. So the 8th is right here. There is a fair value gap there. And then guessing the 12th is not really that important because of earnings is probably around there. So those would be like the real low markers. You just don't want to eat your own food. No. You do not get to eat their food. You can eat your own food. Weirdo. Yeah, so that would be like the worst case scenario, I guess. So the $24 is the golden pocket. I mean, it's definitely not out of the realm of possibility. If this got like a really nasty rug pull, this is like a head and shoulder of sorts. If we got a really nasty rug pull into next week, I could see it coming down to here. It'd be interesting to see it do something like this. I don't think we would expect that. It would be severe. It'd have to start the week off with a slide. I mean, they definitely deliberately brought it back up. It's above 26.20s, which is good, but that's always a tricky one for me. Is at the end of the day, it didn't actually recover on AMC. You can see it like it just sitting inside of potential wedge here. So I guess it came above the wedge just slightly. You guys are like, look at it. It broke out, Booksy. This is like the worst kind of break. I hate this kind of breakout. This is the kind of stuff that causes like that big move where there's like a really tiny like suggestion of a break. And then it doesn't. Nah, it didn't break out. I take it back. Sorry. It's like right underneath it. It just didn't break. Look at that. You could not have been any closer. This is the dumbest thing I've ever seen. It did advance, then it backed up. This is basically like an elaborate hook. So I hate to say that, but it does look like a hook. That's the hourly. Let's go to like the 3-minute. What the bar coding is that? You see that? Oh my gosh. Yeah, I mean, what is there to say about it? In my opinion, and I mean, I just shifted it over a little bit, but in my opinion, it kind of ended right on that mark anyways. Nothing comes of that. There's nothing really good about something like that, you know? Whenever we see that in the market, it's always kind of like, blah. I don't really think you can make much of it. This is a mess. This is a mess of a chart. This looks so bad. This 3-minute chart, the volume here. This is ugly, ugly, ugly. I've been a little bit spoiled. I've been watching other tickers for a while, but I can't believe how like anemic the stock is with its volume. This is a weird one because it kind of double bottomed. It actually says on the chart, to me, it says it double bottomed, but it definitely looks like it's angled down. You see how like the value here is 281, 281, but that's definitely angled downward. So it may have gone like a fraction of a penny lower, which is bothersome. That shows a little bit of weakness. You can see the volume in that sell down too. It's heavy, heavy volume right there. Then it makes a higher high and it backs up, makes a higher low. It does what it's supposed to do when you're leaving, or when you're, at least when you're trying to bottom. So that was a strength test, regardless of whether or not it ends up holding. This is bizarre to me. I mean, if I have to be frank, it just looks like I would just rug pull it. I would go like straight down Monday. I know I just said I thought it may be going Monday, but I think Monday is going to be the day it starts upward movement. I would probably try and rug pull it. Let me see if there's another piece of evidence here. This has a double thrust or a double motion over the top. Maybe there's a second piece of evidence. So going over the top of this trend, yeah, there it is. This is really nice if you're going to come down to 279. I think here's what I would want to see, I guess. Because I think this would be final. I think you could say this is done. I would like to see this go down, hit the 279. I don't know if what happens next is going to be very exciting. But I do think that you need to then, one of two things is going to happen, right? If it's always like a binary decision in the market, up or down. But you have to think about like what would be accomplished, I suppose. If I were going to drop it and then continue down, I'd probably hit that 279 and then I'd have to go back through the floor. So in my mind, I'm looking backwards at this area. I think regardless, you probably would have something that looks a little bit like, and we don't know if it's going to be accumulation or distribution. But if it's bullish, I think you'd get a big buyout motion going from Monday into Tuesday. And I don't know if it takes all day, but it could end up being like an all-day affair. And then you end up with maybe a move on Wednesday. So if it's bullish like that, that's fine. That would be fine. This could be a bullish bottom. I think if it's bearish, you're going to see like that U shape. So you get like a really high push up, but then you end up with like chop low. It probably comes sideways all the way into Friday, which is where operators kind of thrive because they can sow misinformation, right? They can sell out of the money calls one more week or whatever. If the goal is to kind of keep it stagnant, you get this kind of U shape. You probably have like a last minute move. If something like this happens, I think we're going to end up with a really low motion the next Monday, which is a week off. I mean, like I said, I did that timing. I don't see it as very arbitrary. It's extremely specific, and it definitely suggested that we would hit a low here. So I would prefer to see actually, you know what would be even better? I would actually prefer to see this, although I don't know if we'll get it. I'd prefer to see this come up, not exceed 291, but go up to like 288, and then do like a sell-off, but stay above. Like maybe even hit like 280 on Wednesday or something like this, and then go. This to me could be quite bullish, and you could have an end of the week run starting on Wednesday. This is micro stuff. This is not big picture. We already talked about big picture. So, you know, on the big picture, this would look more like a head and shoulder motion, basically, coming down. The thing about any kind of head and shoulder, when it relates to a channel like this, if it breaks out of the channel and it starts shouldering down, you're really locked into timing a lot of times. It's actually quite straightforward. And I would go back to where it jumped the creek, which is way back here. And it's like, yeah, it would definitely start shouldering down, and it could take until the 6th. You can just see it right there. So if we start seeing like a shoulder motion, this is a wave simply enough. Just do it like this. Ignore the noise, right? And you can see that motion were it to complete, would probably walk back the same way or similarly, and you'd be checking those parallels, like this one would hit the same mark. And that seems about right. So the biggest concern, I suppose, for next week is this kind of a flagrant drop that just kind of meanders sideways. And then I think it's probably bearish. And not in a big bearish way, just at least for now. I think it's going to do a second strength test. I don't know what else it's going to go for. I've been speculating 271, maybe 275. Those are the only two places I can see. And then on the big picture, it can't just stop there, right? It has to keep going. Otherwise, it is going to distribute. And then the other thing I'd look for is that second markup wave. So this is quite the opposite, because this suggests that you really should be at a high here, not crapping out, right? Not coming down low. So there's going to be a critical junction. It looks like maybe Wednesday or Thursday. And if we're just sideways, I think we're just screwed. Probably come down. Like we're missing it, right? We're kind of easing downward. And I suppose it even could be like this, where it has a really big upthrust or something. It really doesn't matter. Watch if it makes that lower low and then doesn't advance here. I think it comes right back down. And we're talking about the following Monday, right? It's like silly. And then I don't know what I would do with this whole timing thing. I could adjust it, but there's not really anything to adjust. You know, it is exactly what it is. It's not a it's not haphazard. It's a very straightforward timing schedule. It's extremely tight. It's really on the nose. So, I mean, a week off probably wouldn't kill us, but it just doesn't. It wouldn't make a lot of sense. That's all I could say about that. You know, especially considering we're already out. This kind of a motion here might make more sense if we're going to distribute, like a big pump with dumps or double pump and dump kind of thing. So I guess that would make more sense if it's going to distribute. It's like have it really pump up and then come back down. So I don't know if rug pull is the right word so much as it is, yeah, like a quick kind of flash in the pan moment. And then we'll see what happens out the gate. Like I know what looks good and what doesn't look good, but it's hard to draw that all on the same chart. It gets really messy. So the question of timing here, again, it's not really much of an issue. I mean, technically this looks like 12:30, so I guess you could say the first part of the day. Maybe the first part of the day is, I don't know, is down. I don't know. It's possible, if that's the case, that this isn't going to do another one of these. So I have this going down again, but in reality, yeah, I can't really tell which way that went first. In reality, if this is like the push up, there might be like no need for it. Like there could already be a push here, and you could have a sell down, but then it holds and it goes again, and it gets the gap fill, but it stays beneath this ledge, but it does fill that gap. It just doesn't come above the top, and then it goes into like a distribution cycle. That'd be a little weird because it'd be like, oh, well, really the bottom was here or if it was over here. But I could see it moving pretty fast all the same. There's just so many ways to like pin this chart right now that it's almost frustrating. This is where you could go down and get to the low. I don't really have another way to gauge it. If we don't break out, which we did try here, so I feel like we could probably manage to push over it if we back up and go again. And maybe we try to slump down. I don't know. Timing on this is tricky. There's probably a way to figure it out, but I'm not doing it. It's impossibly slow. The thing is it went from like Friday to Friday, so it's going to go Friday to Friday again if it does another wave. There's just no way to measure it any differently. You can't do it. Yeah, I mean, that could be bullish as all get out and just go, but rally for like 2 days, Wednesday to Friday. Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is the slow-mo version of the same crap. So anyways, it really just depends on what we see, I guess, going into the end of the middle of the week. First couple days would be defining. I would prefer to have a rug pull or just go and like let this be the bottom if it's a little early. I'd prefer to go ahead and get down, hit the I know in the back of my head though that's like a breakdown or it's a weakness. Dang it. Let me see if I can measure this out differently. This chart's getting really ugly. I just don't know why they did what they did. I know that timing. I wouldn't mind it doing that, but maybe it just won't ever go back below. Anyways, I would appreciate if it just gapped down and then just ran up. Who knows, that's going to happen, right? That's like wishful thinking. But if it like gapped down and then just immediately ran up above here, I think it would be done. Like it'd be ready to go. And you could just take off. Triangulation wise, it doesn't seem as reasonable to anything. You know, it just feels very wishy-washy, hopeful, wishful thinking. So on the big picture, looks like Monday starts it. But on the smaller picture, I could see chop if it gets stuck here. GME looks the same way. That was the question you were asking me, and I didn't ever answer it. It's all kind of the same. I mean, they have similarities that in like the way this went. It just didn't quite make it, you know. And you can see that it's above. It's like right on that same floor at 2643 that it was rejecting on here. So it made a lower low and it did push above it, but then it's just kind of sitting on it. And that's a decent place to pull the rug or start something. It doesn't usually result in a giant gap up, but because typically if we end the day like up underneath a support like that, it's not positive. So the more common thing is to have it. I know I'm just doing like sideways here, but that is probably the most common thing, is just to kind of build out more. This has some striking similarities to one other time frame that I don't really want to get into. But it may be possible that we get a little bit of both. Again, if it drops low, I think it's possible we get kind of like a big one-up motion here back to this level. We're kind of confusing charts now, but this is not the same chart. But it is an important level, this area. I could see that. That's tough. That's a tough one. I don't don't understand why the 4 hour looks so bad. I guess in these regions, it did have a drop. It got overbought and then came back below before it rejects again. I guess that's similarity. Again, not using anything particularly bullish, just kind of looking at average reaction. Yeah, this is sort of similar, and then it has like a bigger drop that follows. It's a lot of weakness, because then the rest of this is just pushing back up again in like a 1, 2, 3, 4 motion. This is like a head and shoulder. So they're both distributive. This pushes up with the 1, 2, 3, 4, and then this pushes up with like a head and shoulder motion. The shoulders are weird. They're like divergent. It's very strange. They're there. We just have to see some kind of a change, you know? So if I were looking at it from that point of view, I'd probably suggest we're missing, I would suggest, unless you think this has already happened, that's the backup. It's possible. So like there's 2 backups here, 1 push down again, 1 push down again. This one only has 1. It may just not need the bigger one, or may just not do it, but I could see why that would be reasonable. That's really bizarre, because that's actually completely different. That'd be like us going up and down again, and then up. That'd be like us going up to like 28 and kind of working our way upward into the 3rd, but then drop all the way back down again, and then start new, weirdly enough. That is kind of the pattern here. It's more of an angle. I mean, like I had it, like I drawn it earlier, I drew it downward. It's more of like an angle, so. But these have this like secondary motion where there's like a big buy-in. This was a Monday, Tuesday motion. This was a Monday, Tuesday motion. Actually, they both look like Tuesday moves. It looks like Monday it was down, and then Tuesday it popped. So that would be like Monday coming low. Yeah, and then Tuesday popping up, which is pretty consistent with what we were just saying, which is like coming down again. It's just chop. However, these are the same level, so in that realm, if we were doing that, maybe it goes up a little bit and then it comes back down. But it wouldn't necessarily be a huge sell down, because it'd probably stop at like 25.76. Now the second backup is completely different. This one goes down, it doesn't make a lower low, it hits 26.17. This one actually does make a lower low. And I think that's an indication of like where we're going to go next. Because you can see this, there's strength in that, and then look at where it goes later. And then you can see on this one, there's like weakness in it. And look at where it goes later, you know? It's interesting to see that play out. So we don't have that yet, so we don't know. But I guess if it came back down into Monday, it didn't go that high. I think this probably ends up going up pretty far. I think I said it before, but I think it may end up being like this 2850 level. Like it's like the gap fill and then it drops back through. And I think if it stays up high, I think we're going to see some positivity from that. I guess we'll have to find out. And then both of these take off from this zone right there, which makes sense because they left the marker there 2 times. There's a double gap there. There's a gap here, but there was also a gap up from back here. So there's a huge gap zone right here that was like a double gap. They never filled it. So that would make sense then that that's the level that we need to find support on. And I'm guessing that's not even over the creek yet, but I'm guessing that we're getting close to it. That could be like how a squeeze, I guess, starts if there's some kind of a big move the following week. And this is where it would go from there up to like, next stop is like 36 or 37. Potentially. Albeit we don't know whether it holds that. And I'm guessing, again, that that's probably pretty close to where that creek is. Yeah, it would make sense. Yep, right there. We were right. Yeah, I like 46 myself if it goes high, because it's like a really big fib level retracement there in that zone. So I'm with you on that. Yeah, right here. So this is interesting, to say the least, because this is the zone it needs to kind of get over, and it's the lower creek. I guess my biggest concern is that 32. I don't know what's going to happen there. If that causes chaos and sell-off, I don't know. Yeah, it's going to be tricky right there. However, this other one looks pretty darn good. I think it's we're on point. That is where it needs to be. And then the longest it would take would be like October 17th, which is pretty long. But I guess it could take till then. I don't know why it would, but it could. I feel like this motion right here is pretty fast on both of these. These pickups are really quick. It moves really very fast to the top on those Tuesdays. And then in here as well, I'm sorry. And then this one. So I think there's a decent chance that we're going to get a pretty fast move up. And I guess it just depends on if it gets over it or doesn't. There's like a double move. This is where I will never be able to do it perfectly, you know. If the market just squeezes, then it just squeezes. You can't really easily chart that, because this is like the logical levels. You can just see where they are. It's easy. When it squeezes, it'd have to assume a parallel structure. And I did this chart for GME as well. So the ones that I did for AMC, I think it's over here. Yeah, so the ones that I did for AMC, I didn't even show you guys this chart. This is a little bonus chart for people that are still here. I did something similar for AMC. I had those parallels. I believe that's correct. These are long standing. They've been here forever, since December last year. I don't they're so consistent that I only had to make it once and then I just copied pasted it and it worked really well. So I don't have any doubt that these are the right parallels right here, these guys going up. On GME it was a little bit tricky because there's like an accelerated one and then a more like lazy one. Lazy river. And so I I went back and I looked and I just like couldn't really find like a one size fits all. I felt like this one was pretty good. You can see it's fairly consistent in terms of like pacing. And then there's another one which is like this dotted line, which is a little bit faster. This one that I have on the screen right now feels the most realistic to me. And it does seem to follow pretty well with these major uptrends once they get going. It's like once they break out and find support, it follows really well and then they break down. So like I had these on the chart and I was thinking like this is probably what I would use mostly, to try to determine, again, to some degree, I can't really say for sure that this is going to be right. But I felt like that was probably appropriate. So I was trying to figure this out the other day. And I looked at this and I looked at it upside down for a really long time because when you flip the chart, for some reason, I don't know what it is about the upside down land here. It really cleared up my brain a little bit about it. Where I was like, oh, I can see the shoulder motions and what might be going on. And I made a mess. I did a mess of it right here. I think I messed it up a little bit, but I pretty much just noted that as this was going down each of these structures, it is actually timing out quite nicely because I went and looked and checked where those timings were. And the first two bounces here, although the acceleration's pretty fast, the first major wave here actually looks quite nice. This guy and then this guy. And they do seem to kind of match up. So I don't know. But then the question of like, where does it go after that? I just got kind of stuck. So I didn't share all of it because I mentioned it in the Discord, I think once. I said, hey, there's a parallel chart I'm working on. This is actually where I was like saying I didn't want it to go beneath 26, or I didn't want it to go above here and hold. I wanted to see if it distributed. It looks kind of distributive upside down, which is a good sign. Like it looks like it's not quite done yet, but to me it looks like it's trying to go, which is positive. I don't know. So you can see like this kind of a strange, it's strangely like symmetrical. But like I said, I think these double moves are kind of confusing. So I don't know. And then like from a basic standpoint, what I would probably should be looking at more so than anything else is like the support movements here, and then whether or not there's actually resistance here. And I know this is upside down, but like it's the same concept, right? So you have to kind of take into consideration like, all right, there was a support here, right? And this is an upside down land. It hasn't yet transformed. So if we flip it back over, it's not quite there yet. It's like pinching on the corner. Then here as well, they had kind of started building on these parallels again, these downward motions, and that's where we went. So if timing were consistent on it, you would say that there should be sort of like a wave schematic that fits this neatly here. And I think it's there. You can kind of see it, but I'm not able to perfectly identify. I was trying to figure it out the other day. I couldn't figure it out. I kind of got stuck. So, because in my brain, I'm like, well, if it goes that fast, And it did. It returned from here to here really rapidly. Then is there like a middle point? I don't know. And it gets confusing. And then I thought, well, maybe it's not really about that. Maybe it's about where it hits. You can see why I stopped doing this. But as in maybe it's where it hits the this little weird intersection, because there's this big drop through right here. That to me would strike me as a possible middle, because it's kind of moving underneath the creek and then above it. We're upside down, so I'm using inverted language. But yeah, so if that's the case, then this is where it should come back to here, and then you'd have this kind of a structure. Even though that move is like really fast, it's the same time back to that parallel. That's the whole point. So then the next move would also be roughly the same, and it would be a backup of sorts. And this suggests October 2nd. And this is where things get kind of dicey, because I don't know. Like, how do you even interpret that? I don't know. I make myself laugh because I'm like, it just gets stupid, like confusing. Part of me thinks that this kind of stuff is actually correct, but that it's so hard to do that probably it's not worth the time. Because this is what, in my mind, this is what I'm thinking. When I think of like a head and shoulder, an inverted head and shoulder, I'm thinking about like opening a position, closing a position. Opening a position, closing a position. That's a very simple way, I know. It probably isn't true, like the truest way. But that is the way I think about it. So I don't know. Maybe there's something to that. So this would be like the bounce up, and then there'd be one more drop. That does follow. I mean, there is a bounce up there. That's the bounce up. Then you'd have like one more drop. And then it should go to this parallel, which is really far. So this looks like Wednesday or Thursday. Yeah, this is Wednesday into Thursday. So in theory, I guess, again, two different ways to interpret the same thing, because you could suggest that, well, it should be on top of this parallel, not below it. So even though this is a backup, it went really low. There might be like a pivot here where it's like spinning, but I can't see it, so I'm not going to do that. So in theory, there's a couple different things that could happen. Like one is this could actually be dropping again and attempting to go backwards here and then go. And then another way to look at this is no, this actually comes above here and then settles in on that date, which we can actually just use a 50-50 for right there. And then it should be settling down on that date, but it should be above this parallel. That's very different, because that's like, maybe. Well, I should probably stop anyways. My kid is going to be home from school soon, so I don't know. I guess we'll just see. If nobody's there, then I'll just stop. I can't even get my charts to load, so it's like broken. All right. Well, if you can hear me, I don't have an answer for this yet. I'm just fiddling with it, but I was hopeful that I'd figure it out, but I never really figured it out. So I doubt you guys can even hear me. I appreciate y'all. I hope you have a good one, and we'll talk to you later.